Okay, so it is 6:07. We have quite a few people here. Thank you everyone so much for joining this meeting. I am Lisa Bloodgood. I am with North Brooklyn Neighbors. I'm joined by my colleague Lael Goodman, and we have been working with the community and multiple developers and the city and state, both DEC, OER, and the Department of Health for a number of years on this site. NuHart is a state Superfund site. There's also a brownfields and voluntary cleanup program, parcels within the larger complex. We're going to be talking about all of them today. And yeah, this site has a long and storied history for our community. And what we're going to do today is just talk about what's happening now with the site and what we can all expect to see in the next couple of months. So I've got an agenda up on the screen right now. And I wanted to turn it over to our new council member, Councilmember Lincoln Ressler, to say a few opening words. And then if Assemblymember Emily Gallagher is able to join us, I know she is busy with things in Albany this evening, but if Emily is here, she can also say a few words. So Lincoln, if you are ready, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Okay. Well, I just want to thank you all for joining us tonight, and thank you, Lisa and North Brooklyn Neighbors. As Lisa said, this is one of the most polluted and problematic sites, not just in our neighborhood, but around the state. And we have a long history of developers coming in and making promises and not actually following through on them. And I am hopeful that that is not that we're on a different trajectory now. We've got a developer who has been working closely with the Department of Environmental Conservation, state DEC, oversees this state Superfund site, and I think has generally been cooperative and responsive and communicative with all of us as local elected officials to try and make sure that this site gets cleaned up. But I just want to say very plainly that my goal here is that every inch of this area get thoroughly and properly cleaned, comprehensively cleaned as swiftly as possible, not just the NuHart site itself, but the area around it where we've got contaminants that have spread. And the health and safety of our community is paramount. And it is, we have a very tight and comprehensive set of guidance from the State Department of Environmental Conservation and the city's Office of Environmental Remediation that dictate what needs to happen to clean this site up and make it safe for our community. And I've been eminently clear with the developer, and I know Emily and others have as well, that this site has to be cleaned up, and every single element of the record of decision, the agreement that binds the developer doing the cleaning has to be followed. And so my hope is to, as your council member, is to make sure that we're communicating out information as transparently as possible that we're receiving so that you're all hearing it, that you have opportunities like tonight to ask questions directly of the city and state environmental regulators and the developer themselves. And if there are any issues at all, we're a phone call away to make sure that all of these folks are being held accountable to do what they need to do to get this site cleaned up. And so I know this is all a little scary, it's a little complicated, but I'm hopeful that we're finally on a productive path to getting NuHart cleaned up, and looking forward to the conversation tonight. But really just want to underscore, if there are ever any concerns, if there are ever any issues, just give us a ring and we will do our best to make sure that the developer and the appropriate regulators are hearing from us together to get those issues addressed as swiftly as possible. Is Emily with us? I can't see anything, but if she isn't,
No, she's in conference, unfortunately, up in Albany. Yeah, they're doing the budget.
Andrew, before kicking it to you, I'll just say Emily and I have been tag teaming this one fully. And, since before I took office, she and I have been meeting on NuHart. And this is a site that she's been very actively involved from an advocacy standpoint in cleaning up for years, long before she was the assembly member. And she and I are, because there's both state entities and city entities that are involved here. We've been teaming up as a partnership to make sure that everybody's working closely together, that the lines of communication are clear, and that we're holding everyone accountable to make sure this site gets cleaned up. And so I'm really appreciative of her leadership and focus on this. She's been incredibly helpful in making sure that we get the responsiveness that we deserve. But I don't know, Andrew, is there anything you want to add from the office?
No, hi everyone. I'm Assemblymember Gallagher's Chief of Staff. Just echoing what Lincoln said, we're working in very close collaboration with the council member, with state DEC, city partners, North Brooklyn neighbors, and the developer to make sure that everything gets cleaned up here. And our office is open, our phones are on. Any concerns, please feel free to reach out.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank
Both of you. Yeah, thank you so much. We are really, really fortunate to have such engaged elected leaders working with us on this complicated and contaminated site. So thank you both so much. So now I want to introduce Doctors Joseph Gardella and Alan Rabideau. I hope I have said both of your names correctly. And just very briefly, as a refresher, North Brooklyn Neighbors has received a technical assistance grant from the state to help us and help all of you kind of understand the more technical aspects of the remediation process and how it relates to kind of a number of different things. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves and say briefly why they're here. But we won't be hearing all that much from them tonight. They're really just here to listen and answer questions at the end if they're needed. So I'll turn it over to you two. Thank you.
Alan, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Alan Rabideau. Thank you for inviting us tonight. As Lisa said, we're here to help, and Joe and I both have a particular set of experiences and technical expertise. I've been at the University of Buffalo for almost 30 years now, teaching environmental engineering. My research and teaching specialty is in the area of subsurface contamination and cleanup. I've done some of these technical assistance grants before for some very small sites and some very large federal sites as well. So have a fair amount of experience, especially with the TCE contaminant, and we're just here to be a resource. It's I think we just got started right before everything went off the rails with COVID. So we don't have a long history of all the back and forth with the project, but we've been keeping up with the reports and the documents, and just I'm here to help however we can.
And I'm a chemistry professor and thankful for my good friend, Dr. Rabideau, who complements my experiences. I've been at the University of Buffalo now in my 40th year. And for the last 27 years, I've worked heavily in Western New York communities, including some TAG grants, but more often working directly with community engagement with EPA, DEC, and New York State Department of Health. I've also done work in China, in Ghana, and in Belgium, in doing research that directly affects community issues. So I have a lot of experience, but none of them in New York City until this. So looking forward to reconnecting and getting started on the work.
Thank you both so much for sharing your expertise and leadership with us as we go through this process. We're really, really grateful to have your knowledge. Okay, and now I'm gonna turn it over to Jane O'Connell and Zach Schreiber to do a brief introduction as well, just reminding us kind of who you are and what your roles are in this whole process.
Zach, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
After you, Jane.
Thank you. Such a gentleman. Hi, folks. My name is Jane O'Connell. I'm the Regional Remediation Engineer for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation in the Region 2 office, which covers New York City. I've been working on aspects of this site for 10 or 11 years, maybe more than that. My colleague, Brian Wong, is probably on the phone if he was able to connect. He's the project manager. He's also been working on this site for a long time. So some of you know me, some of you may not. But again, I've been working on this particular project for quite a while. I have a lot of history on this site, and unfortunately with several other prospective remedial programs. But with that said, the Department of Environmental Conservation and our sister agency, the New York State Department of Health, have been working closely with this new developer to implement the record of decision. And some of you may know the record of decision is the document that DEC issued back in, I want to say it was the spring of 2019, that outlines the specific remedial elements that need to be implemented to clean up both the on-site and the off-site contamination at the NuHart site, the Superfund site. As Lisa mentioned at the top, the Superfund site is only the western portion of the overall NuHart building. The eastern portions of the site are being cleaned up under the New York State Brownfield Cleanup Program. It has very similar requirements as the state Superfund program. The only difference is that Brownfield program is a voluntary program, and the state Superfund program is an obligatory program. Just quickly, we since our last meeting in October of 21, there's been quite a lot of activity. You've probably been seeing some activity out at the site. I think Zach Caden from the developer side is going to give you some updates on that. But from DEC's perspective, we had a RCRA, which stands for Resource Conservation Recovery Act. We had a RCRA closure plan that we approved and is being implemented right now to support the demolition of the on-site buildings. And we'll also talk today about next steps, what you can expect coming up. But know that DEC and the State Health Department are actively engaged. In fact, on a weekly basis, we are having calls and meetings on this site. So with that, I'll turn it over to Zach Schreiber at OER to explain his role on this.
Thanks, Jane. Hi, everybody. My name is Zach Schreiber. I'm an assistant director with the Office of Environmental Remediation. OER runs 2 cleanup programs inside of the city, and the regulatory overlay affects the NuHart property. And as such, we're involved for that reason to make sure that the city environmental requirements are satisfied through the state cleanup process. And OER is also very heavily tied into city agencies, and we're able to facilitate some guardrails to make sure that this project runs on time, but it also runs in a way that's predictable, and that we're able to make sure that community notifications are taking place before certain permits are allowed to move forward, and to ensure that DEC is tied into for example, we facilitated the relationship with the Department of Transportation so that any street opening permits, sidewalk opening permits had to go through DEC before any work around the factory took place. So recently the work that was going on to cut off connections to allow for the pending demolition to occur, those all went to Jane and Brian before that work proceeded. So that's the type of help that we're trying to provide to the project, and generally being here to make sure that the city entities are involved and aware of what's going on as we get the phone calls and able to address those issues of concern.
Thank you, both Jane and Zach. Your contributions to this process are invaluable, and you're really a pleasure to work with. So thank you for always being so present and willing to come to every single meeting we ask you to come to, which there are a lot. Okay, so I am now going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Zach Cadden from Madison Realty Capital.
Thank you, Lisa, and the rest of the North Brooklyn neighbors for setting this meeting up. And it's great to continue to work with you and your team as we move through this process. Thank you to Councilmember Ressler, his staff, Assemblymember Gallagher for organizing this event. And it's good to see many people here who've signed in that joined us in October for another update on the project. I also want to thank Jane and her team at DEC, Zach and his team at OER for their continued support and collaboration as we, work through the proper cleanup of this site. So tonight we are going to give you a quick overview of Madison, where we stand today with the site, where we stand in the remediation process, and the next steps that everyone can expect to see over the coming months. And then we'll conclude with a Q&A. The next slide, please. So as Lisa mentioned, my name is Zach Cadden. I'm Director of Development at Madison Realty Capital. Madison's been developing in the 5 boroughs for about the last 12 years. Here, this slide shows you some examples. One second. Ashley, I think this is a slightly dated presentation. The latest one that Shalom sent.
Apologies, just a moment.
I'll take this chance to just fill space and introduce my team who are here. So Mariana Alexander is my chief of staff, and Vanessa Nutter is our North Brooklyn liaison. So any issues that we can help with on our side, in addition to Emily and Andrew from Assemblymember Gallagher's team, of course, just let us know. We'll put all of our contact information in the chat. So if anyone has any questions, any issues, we're happy to help liaise and work. And I should also just say, Lisa, in a variety of different capacities over the years, back from the days when she worked for Steve Levin to now, probably knows more about this site than anybody in our community. So we're very lucky to have her now at the helm of North Brooklyn Neighbors and sharing her years of expertise and knowledge on NuHart with all of us and being a helpful watchdog for the community.
Thanks, Lincoln. Something I both am proud of and can't believe that I have so much knowledge about this site.
All right.
All right, sorry about that.
Good.
Perfect, thank you. So just quickly, here's an overview, an example of some of Madison's ground up affordable housing projects in the boroughs. The first two were sort of a phased project in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn. Those were completed respectively in 2015 and 2017. The project on the right actually is under construction right now, which also is representative of Madison as a community partner. We actually are putting a K-5 public school in the base of that building on the right. So that project we started during peak pandemic, and we're hoping to complete in about a year from now. Now, let's dive into the site. So here's a quick aerial view, which highlights the development site. You'll see in orange, which is, as most people know, DuPont Street, where the mouse is, Franklin, and then bounded by Clay Street to the north. Next slide, please. A plan which clearly shows the boundaries of the state Superfund site, which is on the left-hand portion of the image, which we refer to as NuHart West. And then on the right-hand side of the image, you'll see NuHart East, and that's the brownfield portion of the site. Next slide, please. So here's a quick overview of the proposed redevelopment. So it's 2 buildings on the site, a total of 471 residential rental units. There'll be below grade parking that'll be accessed off of Clay, and ground floor retail on the corner of Franklin and Clay. This project is being developed in conjunction with the city's voluntary inclusionary housing program, which requires 20% of the units to be set aside for affordable housing. And then also the 421A or Affordable New York tax abatement, which requires 30% of the units. So there is an overlap between 20% of the voluntary and 30% of the affordable, and that's why there's still a total of 30% of the units. On the left-hand side, that there'll be an open green space that at this time is really just for residents along Franklin. The buildings will be set back along DuPont, which will be nice and contextual with the residential nature of the buildings to the south. And the taller portion of the project is closer to Franklin. And as you move east towards DuPont, the buildings step down. Next slide, please. Let's talk about the current activities on site. So NuHart East, as a reminder, this is the brownfield portion. This is on the right-hand side of the screen and site plan on the top right portion of the image. The asbestos abatement is complete. The last couple of weeks, we started installing fence, which you'll see highlighted in red. This outlines where the fence have been installed to date along DuPont as well as along Clay Street. And this fence is installed in preparation for demolition. And as Jane had mentioned earlier, what had opened the ability to start demo on the brownfield portion is we had to complete the RCRA closure scope and get that signed off by DEC. On the, Superfund portion of the site, asbestos abatement is complete. So that really completes asbestos abatement across the entire development. But we are still working on the RCRA closure work, which basically is decontaminating all the above grade manufacturing equipment that's been inside the facility since it shut down. We anticipate completing that RCRA scope in May of 2022. And then ultimately, we would submit a document to the state and hopefully they sign off that this work is closed, which would open the gates to demolition on the Superfund site. So here's a quick overview of the upcoming work. So as we mentioned, fence installation is ongoing. We're still continuing to install protection required for demolition. We completed all our water and sewer cutoffs along DuPont, Franklin, and Clay, which some of you in the neighborhood have seen. And we're hoping to be able to pull our demolition permit for the brownfield portion of the site in the next week or so. And then the plan is to start with the building that runs through the site, which is close to the boundary of where you see NuHart West and NuHart East. And then we would demo the buildings along adjacent to our neighbors along Clay and Pont, and then work our way towards the middle of the site. Once that demolition is complete, the goal, in order to vest for the pending tax abatement, we have to install foundational elements for each building before the June 15th deadline. As I mentioned on the previous slide, Demolition cannot start on the registry site until the RCRA closure work is done and DEC provide, the results are acceptable to them. So we expect hopefully that happens sometime in May and demo begins shortly thereafter. Now we're going to quickly go through the demo phasing illustration to hopefully make this more clear for everyone. Next slide, please. So again, quick overview. NuHart East, Brownfields, blue, phase 1, NuHart West on the left, phase 2, Superfund. Next slide, please. This shows you demo phase 1 complete, and that is the brownfield portion. The whole idea, Ashley, if you can, is can people see my mouse or no? Actually, if you just go on DuPont, right where a little bit to the south, right there, basically, keep it right there. That's where the foundational elements would be installed. Correct, right there, in order to vest. Next slide, please. And ultimately, once the RCRA work was signed off by DEC, this shows demo phase 2 partially complete on the brownfield site. Next slide, please. And that shows basically what the site looks like with the slab kept in place and all the buildings demolished. Let's talk about remediation and next steps. So on NuHart East, which is the brownfield portion, the remedial design or the remedial action work plan is in process and review will be in review with the state and OER. And ultimately, after that has been signed off by the agencies, that would open up, supportive excavation, remediation, construction on the brownfield portion of the site. On NuHart West, we recently submitted the 30% remedial design, which ties to the remedy and the record of decision. That was submitted last week to DEC. I assume it's going to take them about 60 days to respond. And then there's a process by which we have to further detail those design documents for DEC's blessing. So it's a 30% phase, a 60% phase, and then effectively 100% phase. And until that's approved and signed off by the agencies, we can't continue to go below grade, excavate and clean up on the Superfund portion of the site. So, it's great to see everyone again. Last time I saw most of you was in October. I think that what's really important, obviously a new council member, Assembly Member Gallagher is still in the area. We are committed to the site, are committed to working with the agencies, our neighbors through this process. We understand that there's been many different faces at the helm, and we're hopeful that we can see the site cleaned up safely, quickly, and work together with the community to put this behind us, build a beautiful building, and contribute to the community and surrounding area. Most of you have had access to our weekly updates. If not, you could follow up with the contact information below. We send weekly updates based on site work, pending public notice periods for relevant environmental documents. And, we're happy to answer any questions and continue to be here as we work through this process together. I also want to mention that we have our environmental consultant, James Bello from Haley Aldrich, in attendance. So if the questions get too technical, I'll be sure to defer to him for a response. Thank you.
Just before we do questions, I just wanted to recognize we have Shelby Garner and Mary Domerick from Congressmember Maloney's office, and just want to thank them for joining us as well and for the Congressmember's leadership on this issue.
Thank you, Lincoln. And hi, Mary and Shelby. Thanks for joining us. So hopefully everybody got a chance to grab that QR code, but we also have a link for those signups that we'll share in a little bit. But now I think there are so many really great questions in the chat. I'm going to turn it over to Lael, and she's going to kind of go through those questions one by one. making sure they're all addressed. If somebody, the person who asked the question, if you want to unmute yourself and elaborate on your question or ask it, again, in your own words, you're welcome to do that as well. So thank you, Lael, for moderating.
Great. Yeah, a lot of good questions. I think the first place to start would be there are some questions about what are the contaminants that are being dealt with. And I think that's just a foundational piece that people who are maybe newer to the process would like to know. So I'm going to hand that over. I'm not sure if Jane or who would want to take that question.
I can take it. Thanks, Lael. So yeah, I realized I probably should have. I assumed that I knew all the people who are on the call because we've gotten a lot of interest in the site over the years. But for those of you who are not familiar with the contaminants at the site, there are two main types of contamination on this property. The first is what are called phthalates, and they're basically plasticizers. They were used in the manufacturing process by NuHart as part of their process of making plastic. They made vinyl sheeting, they made like shower curtains, things like that. So phthalates are a plasticizer. They are a hazardous waste when they are released into the environment. And those are present beneath the building down by the water table, about 15 feet below grade, on the western portion and the western and southwestern portion of the site, of the registry site. The second type of contamination are a chlorinated solvent called trichloroethylene or trichloroethene or TCE. TCE is a solvent that is frequently used for cleaning machine parts and was likely used at this site to clean some of the manufacturing equipment, to take some of the phthalates and some of the other contaminants off the equipment when they needed to clean that equipment. So the phthalates are present in soil and groundwater and soil vapor on the northern portion, north central portion of the site. And just the record of decision that has been issued addresses both types of contamination in all media on-site and off-site.
Okay, so just to follow up briefly on that, you were talking about soil vaporization. People are asking about the any toxic dust. Do people need to be worried about things like that?
During the demolition itself? Are you talking about during the demolition or during the remedial action?
At any time, basically, probably now, and also
Okay.
during the demolition and during the cleanup.
Okay. So the soil vapor contamination has been delineated on site. It is underneath the existing site building, but it has not extended, from the data we have, it has not extended to the east to any of those residential buildings. We did some sampling across the street, across Clay Street to the north. We did find some vapor across the street to the north. We did try to access some of the private properties across the street to do soil vapor intrusion testing. We were not successful in getting access to those properties. But there is no vapor that goes beyond that to Commercial Street. We've also delineated off in that direction. So right now there is no current exposure to that soil vapor because there are no occupants on the property. In terms of dust, I think I saw very briefly one of the comments, or do you need to be closing your windows or anything like that during the demolition? And Zach Schreiber and Zach Caden can probably speak to this also. Before the City Department of Buildings will issue a permit to demolish the building, and again, we're talking about just the above grade structures, right? We're not talking about the slab that is currently acting as a cover system. All of the above grade structures have to be decontaminated under the city for lead paint and asbestos. And on top of that, DEC under the record closure plan required Madison to also inspect and test all of the piping inside of the building to make sure that there was no hazardous waste in any of that piping or any of the above ground structures. So to answer the question, the Department of Buildings does have, dust mitigation that's required as part of the demolition permit. But DEC at least is satisfied that none of the materials or have any of the hazardous waste, the phthalates or the TCE in them.
Okay, next question. People are asking if the contaminants in the cleanup plan will be taken out of the ground, or is it simply that protective barriers will be put up?
It's a little combination of both. In the areas that we have access to excavate, so any of the areas that are within the property boundaries, the remedy includes full excavation to remove the phthalate contamination on the Superfund portion of the site, as well as the TCE contamination in soil on the north central portion of the site. Where it gets complicated is that the phthalate contamination does extend off-site under a public roadway. And that public roadway has lots and lots of utilities in it, and it is not amenable to a full excavation. So the record of decision does call for two sort of main components of the off-site remedy for the phthalates. One is to put in a cutoff wall at the down gradient property, which is located diagonally across the street. And the other is recovery of any recoverable product that's underneath the public rights of way. And all of those details are going to be included in the remedial design phase. Right now, what we said is you have to recover as much of the product as you can. It's up to the engineers to come up with the method for doing that.
Okay, people are wondering about some of the details about how often air quality and water quality is being tested. There's some concern about the playground across the street and obviously people who live in the area. So wanting to hear a little bit more about kind of the frequency and the protective measures being taken there.
Okay, so for the water, all the water that comes to your tap in your apartment or your house comes from upstate. We don't use any of the groundwater in Brooklyn for drinking water purposes. As part of the ongoing monitoring at the site, the consultant, James Bellew, and his staff have been doing monthly and quarterly monitoring of all the wells around the site. They're continuing to recover recoverable product on site. In terms of air quality, the air quality, the contaminants at this site are not airborne. They are in beneath the building and beneath the pavement on the property and off site. During the remedial phase, when they start doing the excavation and the remediation, they will have to implement a very robust community air monitoring plan. That will include probably roving monitors in the neighborhood using handheld equipment, as well as stationary monitors within the area where they're doing the remediation activities.
Quick question. Oh, I'm sorry. That was my question for the air quality testing. Have they been doing that obviously for asbestos? Once it's kind of like maneuvered or touched, the fibers can get into the air. Like, how has that been contained? It sounds like that's been fully remedied. How is that, or was that being contained? And was that being tested the past few months? We live right next, like for context, we live directly touching the factory.
Zach Caden, can you answer that? That's not in DEC's purview. That's the city, I think, and DEP.
Licensed asbestos contractor who followed protocols. We had air monitoring there every single day. to monitor air conditions. All the workers wore proper protection. So everything was removed, left the site in accordance with protocols. And then they basically, DEP did many periodic inspections to make sure that everything was being done in accordance with their procedure. And all the asbestos is gone, and we got the proper sign off from DEP that the entire site is clean at this point.
Okay, thank you.
So another question is parking. The construction has caused a lot of parking issues for people. Is there any plan for accommodations for that?
Is that Caden?
That's me. Sorry, I missed that. Say it
Yeah.
again, Leo.
Parking in the area. There's been a lot of issues with parking due to all construction and street closures, things like that. Is there any kind of anything you can offer to residents in accordance with that?
No, so I think, listen, we understand it's a concern at this point. We really want to execute the demolition, remediation, and construction safely, which requires us to take up a portion of the street and sidewalk. So I think safety is a priority. We need to make sure that we have the proper protection around the site. And, you know, ultimately, when the project's complete, there'll be a new parking garage in the area.
Okay, another question might be good for you, Zach, is there is, a problem with some people in the area who don't have access to the weekly updates that Ashley has been sending around. Is there an ability to put any kind of information on the site itself so that people walking by would have access to that information, or make it available in person there?
So I think we're trying is the goal. I know Councilmember Ressler and his team had suggested that, and we put up the QR code so people can walk by and understand where to sign up so they get the periodic updates. Historically, we've had issues on the site of putting stuff up and it being vandalized and stolen and damaged, and it just becomes a maintenance. So we're trying to figure out the perfect hybrid of getting the information in everyone's hand, posting it, whether through North Brooklyn Neighbors, Smart Sheets, having some information on the site, but, haven't found the best solution of, literature posted on that fence that doesn't get stolen or damaged or ruined by weather on a continuous basis.
Acacia, I know you asked that question. Did you want to unmute yourself and clarify?
Hi, yes, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Acacia with Brooklyn Public Library. Yes, I just wanted to directly ask that because I understand the troubles that you can have with things being torn down, but it would be mean a lot to this community, and it would really mean something coming from your company if you make a real effort to do that. Make sure that the community knows. And I'm not just talking about QR codes. There are a lot of new people in this neighborhood, and the digital divide, a lot of people in this community that have moved here don't use QR codes, believe it or not. And it's important that you make clear what is happening at this area. There was nothing available for people to know across the street from the playground that asbestos was being removed. So I think it would be a huge thing of faith to give to this community if you made signage a priority for this particular remediation. And that's just all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Acacia, I'm happy to connect with you offline. I see you're affiliated with the library, and so I would be interested in maybe talking through some ideas, perhaps through the local library branch, to make sure that people who don't have access to email or can't access the QR code easily have access to the information.
Thank you, Ashley.
And we've been pushing on this. I think, we got this request from a number of folks in the community, and so have repeatedly raised it with the development team. we're happy to help any way we can as well. I think the emails that you all send out every week are very helpful and are clear and are really good communication. And I would love for us to figure out a way to just print them and laminate them and post them up on the site or something as simple as that, because I do think it's helped a lot, those emails. And if we could just make sure that folks who aren't on the list are getting the information as well, it would go a long way. So appreciate your openness to considering it again. And thanks, Acacia, for raising.
So people are asking about some of the disruption to their daily lives. What are the hours that this kind of construction is permitted? Does it happen on Saturdays? What is the expected noise pollution? So.
And typically it's DOB permitted hours, which would be 7 to 6. Most work days I'd say are 7 to 3. Some cases 8 to 3, 8 to 4. On most of our projects, we don't work on Saturdays unless there's a makeup day due to weather, or something in sequence that has to keep going. So that's generally, how we work on our construction sites.
And is that anything that, if there is a day that needs to be made up, that people would be able to know in advance?
Listen, we're planning to keep that smart sheet forum and weekly updates going through the life of the project. So it's something called an after hours variance that we easily could let residents know when an AHV, after hours variance, is pulled. And that's also something that's publicly available through DOB records, but for ease, whatever forum, those are posted on site too, because permits have to be displayed.
To switch gears a little bit, I'm not sure if Lincoln, this is right for you, but people are asking about the plan for the school and kind of where all of that is at. It's been a hot issue in the past.
Yeah, one of the many frustrating components of this. So I think that certainly prior to this cleanup, the community has been eminently clear that we are not comfortable with a school across the street at the agreed upon site that was negotiated in the Williamsburg Greenpoint rezoning. And I very much share that sentiment. I'm interested in hearing from community members about how they feel about the openness to that location as a school after the cleanup is complete. I'm still doing my due diligence and research. I certainly have reservations and concerns. My team is actively, and when I say actively, like super actively, trying to come up with alternative locations that could be considered for the school. The School Construction Authority and the Department of Education absolutely recognize that there is a seat need. I think it's egregious that you've got a family that lives on Commercial Street that has to walk all the way to Mess Roll to get to the nearest public school. That's a 20-minute walk. That doesn't make any sense. Northern Greenpoint needs a public school. And so I'm fully and totally committed to helping to make that happen. But we need to do it at a site that is safe. And so like I said, I'm continuing to do my due diligence on this location. I have concerns. In the meantime, we are actively considering alternative locations that we can propose to the SEA. They are insistent that it be a site that they don't pay for because this site is free. But that's just a negotiating position from my perspective. And my commitment to our community is that we're going to find a new school one way or another.
Laura, I see that your hand is raised. So if you want to unmute yourself and chime in, now is a good time.
Yes, hi, Lincoln, hi. You
Hi.
asked about the residents weighing in on the location of the school. I think that it would be reckless to even consider it, even after the cleanup. This neighborhood has a long history of, being snookered by the environmental and health agencies. And, you know, I just don't believe that 100% safety can be achieved. In the past, we were always told that there wasn't even a plume under this site. We were lied to for many, many years. That this whole contamination that happened was brought to different agencies' attention many years ago. Just my husband and I alone made complaints to the fire department, all kinds of places, whatever environmental agencies were around at the time. And it was a cover up. So at this point, you know, I think it cannot be trusted. I would not trust it. And I would be very vocal to the parents, you know, putting their kids in a school located right next to that plume. I think it would be harmful for those families. My family suffered enough over the years from this site, and I have no intention of watching any other family suffer without their knowledge.
Yeah. Look, you know, Laura, you were one of the most knowledgeable and experienced and effective environmental advocates we have in our community. You've lived it. You've lived all of the challenges that we face in Greenpoint for your whole life, and as your family has for generations. And so, you know, I deeply appreciate your opinion, and you know, have to say it's seems eminently reasonable to me. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Lincoln.
So to pivot back a little bit to the demolition and everything surrounded that, there are some questions about the site security. We have reports of broken windows being open, and also trapdoors. I'm not sure if the person wants to clarify trapdoors, people going in and out, roof activity. So just a little bit of information on how residents will know that if they see those kind of things, that either they're being monitored, or is there somewhere they should report something like this to? I'm not sure if MRC or Jane, who would
I'm happy to take it to start there. So I think, listen, as we started this, you know, it's an open forum. We gave you a few means, either to Ashley's email, there's a DuPont and Madison realtycapital.com, that anyone who sees anything with pictures, you know, feel free to ask a question or reach out, and we can get back to you as quickly as possible. As you saw from the presentation earlier, through the abatement, through the fence installation, the RCRA work, there are various contractors going in and out of the site to perform the various tasks discussed. Ultimately, once construction picks up, there will be security at all times. And then in terms of the site was vacant for a while, a lot of these rolling gates and doors didn't work. We've fixed a few of them for logistics to have ease of trucks coming into the site so it doesn't block the sidewalks and hold up traffic to the extent that we can. So, you know, hopefully soon the site will come down, but right now with secure, and you know, expect to see contractors coming in and out as discussed. With respect to the broken windows and skylights, through their remediation, some of the windows were broken or had to be disposed of, and you know, it's fine at this point. With it, it's not posing any issues at the building, and ultimately that's all going to be demolished.
Zach, also there's been air monitoring going on throughout this whole process on the site through the asbestos abatement and through all of the RCRA activity. So no matter what, there has been data generated for the community through the air monitoring being performed.
How can residents access that air monitoring information?
The data is provided directly to the DEC in reports.
Yeah, Lael, those are submitted to us in daily reports, but I have been talking to Zach Caden and others about trying to figure out how we can, make them available to the public. This is something that was brought up in the October meeting, perhaps setting up some type of website that has not been confirmed yet, but that is something that we're still in discussions. And if we can get that set up, then that would be a place where we would be able to post the daily reports.
And if there is some kind of breach of some kind, what would happen in a situation like that if the levels do get above what is safe?
So the community air monitoring plan has action levels that are set, 20 times or 30 times lower than the level that would actually potentially have a harmful effect. So we have it's a very conservative threshold value. If they start approaching that threshold value, they're supposed to stop work. It's usually we're monitoring two things. We're monitoring dust and we're monitoring for volatile organic compounds. I think what James was talking about, they also were, that's not part of DEC's oversight, but they were also monitoring the air for asbestos as part of the asbestos abatement. But in terms of the contaminants that DEC would be looking at, it would be dust and volatile organic compounds. And again, when those concentrations are come close to exceeding the threshold that we've set, they have to stop work. They have to assess what the cause was. They have to address the cause. And then once they've addressed the cause and the concentrations go down below that level, they can start work again.
But for example, there wouldn't be any way for like a nearby resident to know to close their windows at that point because the levels have reached, a place to where.
No, but again, well, there's again, the thresholds that we set are set so conservatively low that and with dispersion like that would be an air monitor that was right next to where the excavation might be going on. But there's not like a alarm system or anything like that that's set up. No.
There are some questions about the specific health impacts of some of the specific contaminants on the site. Joe, did you want to speak to that? Or actually just the specific contaminants themselves, just to give people a little bit more understanding?
I'm really not up to date on the health impacts of the phthalates, especially. That's sort of outside my background. So I think that would be a question for DOH.
I think we have two of our DOH colleagues on the phone. Angela Martin and Stephen Lawrence. Are either of you on the call? Could either of you answer that question?
Hi, this is Steve Lawrence with State Health. The camp stations, as you said, Jane, are set up very conservatively. The neighborhood residents will recognize them as suitcases on tripods. DOH is reviewing this data daily as it comes in. I'm not a toxicologist. The actual health effects of these things are given to us by the people who understand the hazards and the toxicities of these site contaminants. So specifically, I cannot answer that question. However, if they were to get a hold of me, I could talk to the people at State Health who could actually answer their questions more comprehensively.
If you don't mind,
Lael, if you want, we can Stephen and Angie can reach out to the DOH toxicologist perhaps tomorrow and get some more information on the health effects. Maybe there might be fact sheets that they may have, and if they can get that information, we can provide it to you and Lisa, and maybe you guys can post that as well.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to say very broadly, very big picture. Phthalates are, as Jane mentioned earlier, they are plasticizers. They are endocrine disrupting chemicals. And so they disrupt your hormonal systems, which is why we are particularly worried about the school and the playground, because children have developing hormonal systems. And so they are more vulnerable to exposure, potential exposures to phthalates than, say, seniors would be, because their hormonal systems are no longer developing in the same way that children are. So that's chemical, kind of broad chemical number one. The other, the TCEs, these are known carcinogens, and acute exposure is very dangerous, but they are more likely to volatilize, meaning turn into a gas and enter buildings or the air column, whereas phthalates do not do that. They do not volatilize, or they do not become a gas. They're very kind of stable in that sense. So I just wanted to make sure that people were clear on that. I'm sorry that that I'm answering that question. Okay.
So, hi, this is Angie Martin with State Health. First of all, we don't want to make generalizations about chemicals to a broad audience, because every person has very specific potential issues that could affect their health. And so we don't want to, like I said, make general statements, because these are questions that really should be taken up with an individual's medical doctor. But what we can do is put someone in touch with our sister bureau, the toxicologist that we work with right down the hall. And if they have specific health concerns or issues that they'd like to have more information on, we can certainly facilitate the gathering of that information. Also, the health department does have several different fact sheets that I'm going to post the link onto this chat, so people can go right to the health department webpage and look up. We have at least a fact sheet for TCE that's really informative, has a lot of good information, so a lot of specific information too. And that can help people sort of assess whether they might have a health-related question that they'd like to follow up with us about. Thank you.
And thank you for that as well, Angela. I know that our agencies have a much more difficult time making general statements. So, but I'm not I don't work for the Department of Health, so I can make those general statements. But fact sheets are very, very useful. And we have some as well. I'm going to try and dig out right now to also share, but we'll make sure that those are shared with all of the documents that kind of are generated out of this evening. So yeah, thank you again, Angela, for your response.
I think another thing that people are remembering from meetings, from a while ago, is the tent that has been talked about being put up. And I know there's a difference between, the Superfund site and the Brownfield site. I'm just wondering if, I'm not sure, Jane, but if someone can kind of go through what that will do in terms of protection and where that will be, and kind of when that will be as well.
Yeah, sure. So what we're talking about is, it's a little bit more. It's going to look like a circus tent from the outside, right? It's going to be big white structure. It also has an air handling system and filters. And the purpose for that is to, one of the things that the health department will tell you is you can't have a reaction to a chemical unless you have an exposure to that chemical, right? And the exposure is the way that you come in contact with the chemical, either through touching it, breathing it, eating it, dermal contact. You have to have an exposure to have a reaction to a chemical. So one of the things that we wanted to do, like right now, there's a building over it, nobody's drinking the water, nobody's in there breathing the air, no one's in contact with the soil, right? So those exposure pathways are all sort of addressed right now. Once we start digging up the site to take this stuff out of the ground, you open up some of the exposure pathways, right? You're going to have contractors digging the stuff up. There could be dust going off site. There could be this. So the idea of the tent is, we've done this on other remedial sites. Generally, it's to address odors, which I'm not sure that this is going to be a very odorous material, but the purpose of the tent is to the extent we can, minimize or eliminate those exposure pathways that would occur during the excavation and remedial phase. So I don't know if that answers your question. I'm sure I could give you more details, but essentially what we're trying to do is keep it as encapsulated as possible for as long as possible to reduce exposures to the community.
And that will be on the western portion of the site?
That will be on the western portion of the site. There's also an area of petroleum contamination on the brownfield site that we are in discussion to potentially put a smaller, it's a much smaller area, but that's potentially odorous material, and it's an area that we're also looking at potentially having some type of a negative pressure structure around. That has not been confirmed yet. We're still waiting to work on that side of the site.
Speaking of exposure pathways, and this might be a little bit ahead of where we are, but obviously there's going to be trucks taking material from the site through the streets, kind of information about how we can make sure that that is protective of people's health and there's no leakage.
So the trucks that will be entering and leaving the site will have to follow the established truck routes that are established by the City Department of Transportation. The trucks themselves, depending on whether they're digging into, if they're digging into the wet soil below the water table, they'll have to have liners in the trucks. If it's dry soil, they will not need the liners. They will only need a tight fitting cover. Not like those sort of flimsy, mesh things that you see over trucks. This would be a tight fitting, hopefully reducing the odors and anything that could come out of the trucks. But there will have to be trucks. Look, to get this site remediated, we need to take this stuff out. There's no way around that. There's no way to avoid the trucking if we want to get the site remediated. So it is it's a short-term pain for a long-term gain. We've been doing this, DEC has been overseeing this type of work for quite a while now. All over the state, we've gotten pretty good at it, I think. And it's just really going to be a question of keeping the contractors and the consultants, really Johnny on the spot, making sure that the contractors are following all the procedures that they need to follow. All the trucking companies are going to be following their procedures. So that's what we want to communicate to the community.
So, these are measures that will obviously have some disruption on the surrounding community. Is there an estimated time frame for how long this cleanup may take? Obviously, it probably depends on exactly what you find, but is there an estimated lower end of things or higher end of things?
We're still evaluating. We're still working through the 30% remedial design. We're still figuring out the logistics, which really will impact the schedule for the remediation.
So that's something that would be updated in those weekly updates once you have kind of a better idea.
And again, we can do that, and however, North Brooklyn neighbors or Councilmember Ressler and Gallagher, Assemblymember Gallagher's team think are necessary to do these forums, we're happy to participate in these as well.
Actually, Jane, just to follow up, one more thing. Will the trucks be washed coming out? People asking about, the potential for tracking aside from just the covers
Yeah,
on top? Are there other?
Right, they have to, normally there's a truck wash that's inside the structure. It would happen, there would be a stabilized construction entrance. It would be inside the structure so the truck is cleaned before it leaves the structure.
Okay, and then this question, maybe for MRC, maybe for Lincoln, you know, this is something that's really obviously going to affect the community a lot. People are asking about what kinds of benefits this will bring. You know, will there be access to any green space within there? Will there be any, you know, cleanups to or redoing of the playground nearby? Obviously, the school is something that's kind of still up in the air, but you know, what kinds of concessions is the community getting because of this?
So I think what's important to note is this site is completely as of right. We're not asking for any discretionary waivers from any agencies. And ultimately, you know, we're looking to clean up the site that's been stagnant for a while, a concern and eyesore of the neighborhood, and, you know, activate it with people and, you know, other members of the Greenpoint community.
I think that's right. To me, the most important thing is that this area gets cleaned up, and it is a, you know, it's a worry to me that that it hasn't been cleaned up yet, and I want to make sure that it's cleaned up as comprehensively as possible, as swiftly as possible. And so with DEC and OER providing tight oversight, you know, working with Madison Realty, you know, we want to make that happen, and that to me is like the single most important benefit that we could have, is to live in a place that's safe and clean and healthy. So that is really the focus. And as Zach said, this is not a development where any of the elected officials have any approvals to give or anything like that. It is a development that they have the authority to build, and there will be some affordable housing. You know, I certainly wish it was more, but there will be some affordable housing, and you know, we're hoping that they're going to be a good neighbor in both the cleanup process and in the construction for the new development. And, you know, I think they have been so far.
Okay, so I see that there are some hands raised. So, you know, I'm trying to get to as many questions as I can from the chat, but also if you have something urgent, we can also, you know, go to the hand raises. So Kevin Lachera, if you would like to unmute yourself, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks. Leland, you touched on a bit of my question, which, and I agree with Lincoln that I think that the cleanup is absolutely, you know, paramount, the most important thing, bar none. You know, but I also do think that, you know, a lot of folks are feeling this way and saying this in the chat, that this is going to be a really disruptive process. This has been a really disruptive site and a painful site and a damaging site for so many people for so many years. You know, and I think that it would go a long way. I mean, you know, these green spaces that y'all are developing that are, as you said, kind of currently planned right now just for residents. I don't know if that's something that you're saying it's currently planned because that could change, or currently planned because you're trying to figure out the scope of it. But, you know, the playground across the street, you know, the street conditions around the site itself, and those green spaces that you're developing in Northern Greenpoint, there is a, you know, because of the industrial history of this area of the neighborhood, there's a deep premium on open space and green space. And so I certainly would like to see that green space that y'all are developing accessible to everyone in our community, and not just folks that are renting the apartments in the building, especially if it is at ground level. I don't know if Zach, if you can speak any further on that.
Oh, listen, Kevin, I hear you loud and clear. I think what I said really stands at this point. The focus is clean up the site. It costs money to clean up. That's the focus of, you know, the dollars. Right now, everything is for residents, as the site is as of right. I hear you loud and clear, and you know, at this point, I don't anticipate that changing.
Yeah, I think that, it is, it's frustrating, you know, it's frustrating to hear, you know, when we talk about, you know, the process of the cleanup itself and the thoroughness of the cleanup itself and the work that you all are doing and the due diligence, that is really important. And, you know, I think that it's just concerning to me and frustrating to me. And I bring this up, you know, these other community give backs to build that trust, you know, because I mean, I think about just the very basic thing of putting up those flyers, you know, or getting, for instance, if the flyers are getting ripped down, getting a, you know, one of the enclosed boards with a lock on it that allows you to put that stuff in an enclosed space with a lock, you know, printing it out.
So that's not a problem. And
No,
typically, once there's more consistent construction activities, that's not an issue at all. The issue right now, when contractors aren't on site or people aren't on site, those are vandalized. So anytime once there's construction and things are moving, there's no issue with a board up there and updates, because we'll have security, we'll have people there. It's easy to print and slip in. I think really it's now this interim period where there's periods of time where no one's on site and things get destroyed. People have broken into NuHart for years. There's things all over, you know? So it's really, I think, this window, and I guess the commitment I can give you is that once consistent construction starts with those permit boards, it's much easier to lock in those updates. I think it's really just now this flux period.
Okay, yeah, just, it seems like a minimum, but that's, you know, that's what we're getting. So thank you.
I'm going to move on. Oh, Joe, did you want to say something or?
No, sorry.
Okay. I'm going to move on to Michael Hoffman. I see your hand is raised. If you'd like to unmute yourself, now would be a good time.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to bring up the part about the parking again. When DEP was doing the upgrade to the water treatment plant, they found lots in the area where they could have their workers park. Designated areas where they park in empty lots. I don't see why this can't be the same thing in North Brooklyn, in Greenpoint, because all the parking spots are being taken up by Greenpoint Landing right now. It's impossible to find a parking space. I know I've driven around for at least 2 hours sometimes looking for a parking space. I mean, if DEP can do it, so can these contractors. It's got to be done. There's none of, they're taking up 2 blocks of parking as it is with a fence. So I think they can find a spot, designated spot where their workers can go, like DEP did. That they used to have a little van and they brought the workers from this designated spot, and it worked out great. I mean, it's getting terrible to find parking in this area. And then with the construction, it's going to be twice as bad. Thank you.
Would anyone like to respond to that?
Listen, we're open to ideas. I don't know if it's a viable solution, but Michael, if there's something more concrete or specific on this issue that you want to email us, happy to look into it.
Well, see, that's not up to the community to find your parking spots. It's up to the contractors to find their parking spots and, not take it away from the community.
Understand, but as I said, the main purpose of taking up the parking lane is really for the safety, to execute the demolition and make sure pedestrians are safe, and that could happen per the approved plans and the sequencing and logistics. So understand that this is a byproduct of that, but
I understand that, but when you start construction or demolition or whatever you're doing, you got to have workers that are going to do it, and they're going to wind up parking all over the streets. Find a designated lot, let them go in the lot, and you bring them back. I mean, there's plenty of empty lots around, and we shouldn't have to find them. Should be the contractor that's finding them.
And I'll just add, I'm gonna come up to the area this week in the next 48 hours, walk around, reach out to the folks at Greenpoint Landing, Brookfield and Park Tower, and figure out if there are any things that we can do to consolidate the parking that's being taken up right now to try and make some accommodation. So our team will look into it as well, try to make some recommendations across the different developers that are taking up spaces. We do, and appreciate your suggestion, Mike, about seeing if there are any lots in the area that the developers, not just Madison, but others as well, could potentially use to alleviate some of the demand, the pressure that's being placed on the community for with all the spots that are gone. So, and if anyone wants to send me any suggestions, I'm happy to follow up and try and make it happen.
No, I have a suggestion, Lincoln.
Please.
You're the man. You're the man. Give me a designated spot in front of my building.
You think I have all kinds of power that I don't got, but I appreciate you, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Lincoln.
I just want to apologize. I'm gonna have to jump in 2 minutes, but my folks, my team is on here. We just have a few block associations that are coming for a different Zoom, so I just want to apologize. Sorry.
No, thanks for joining, Lincoln. Jane Poole, I'm going to go to you next, and then we have a few more people. After that, I'll go to Zachary Einstadt, and then Kay Summers, and then Laura Hoffman.
Well, there was one thing that I guess hasn't been brought up, and I'm actually just skimming. I don't know if you're going to go here. I do think it's also important. So Madison still is not the owner of the site. The site is still in bankruptcy. We are still have been pursuing this and collaborating with the agencies because we, know or we really believe that we will take title to that. We're hoping that that happens in, I would say, the next 60 days, but we're still subject to the legal process and how that plays out. So I think that, is an important update for everyone as well.
And just to be clear, once that happens, that would mean that kind of some other parts of the cleanup could go ahead, or what would that mean for
Listen, the way effectively nothing, we're really operating right now as we own it, because we're moving we're spending the dollars, we've engaged a consultant team, we're working with contractors, because we have a working relationship with the borrower and there's a cooperation because time is everything and we want to see the site cleaned up and the building built. But just, I think that's an important update that we still don't have title to it.
Okay. Jane, did you still want to say something or?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Lil. Yeah, I'm not an expert, but I've had air quality issues over here where I live, a few blocks away. And I know that you're talking about monitoring the air, and I wondered, are they using particulate matter monitors? Because those don't really tell you what's in them. And Suma canisters, I've learned, will actually let you see what the particles are, because it's one thing to know that there are a lot of particles, and it's another thing to know what the particles are. So I was just curious about what monitors you're using. Thank you.
I will speak to James. Do you want to take that, or you want to? I don't think we're not using Suma canisters. Normally, that's what we use for soil vapor or indoor air sampling.
Correct. We're not. We're just using a PID and dust tracks.
Can you explain a
What are
little bit
those?
more? Yeah.
So a photoionization detector is what determines concentrations of volatile organic as it passes by the sensor. So to date, we haven't had really any hits of volatile organics leaving the site as part of our community air monitoring program. So that would be predominantly the contaminants of concern on the site, where it'd be measuring a total concentration of volatile organics, such as trichloroethylene, the HEFA oil on the site, and what have you. It wouldn't measure the exact concentration of HEFA oil, TCE, but it measures the total volatile organics that are passing by the sensor. And to date, there have not been any. The second meter in these boxes are particulate meters, and that is dust and suspended particulates that are passing by the media, the sensor for the particulate meter. So it could be something as simple as dust blowing in the area from dirt and debris on the sidewalk to something falling down from just suspended particles and just dust in the air. So to date, there hasn't been anything out of the ordinary with the dust reading. So the Suma canisters that Jane was discussing, those are usually for concentrations of specific volatile organic compounds. So we are not doing Suma canisters on the site right now, but historically there has been a survey done. I think it was back in 2015 or 14, specifically around the perimeter of the site, evaluating PCE. And I believe there was nothing found in that survey. I know that was presented at the community board meeting in 2017, I believe, the results of that.
But once you start the remediation, does it make sense to have the Suma canisters?
The Suma canisters are not immediate results. The Suma canisters have to be run by a laboratory. So you would not be able to get those results right away. The best device for this type of work is the actual photoionization detector, the PID, because that is giving you real-time readings of concentrations of volatile organics in the atmosphere. And basically with the community air monitoring program, there are protocols in place when there are thresholds that are exceeded. Basically, there's a stop work threshold, and there's an evaluation of whether you're going to use a foam suppressant, alter your means and methods, or essentially encapsulate the source. And those are immediate. So, basically when you have a spike, those are immediate responses. It's not we're going to sit there and we're going to wait 15, 25, 30 minutes. It's immediate responses that are done.
Okay, thank you. And is it as specific as the Suma canister, or I'm just, this is interesting.
Yeah, no, the PID is not specific, just total.
Oh, so it's just all volatile or not, but it's not specific about what the, okay.
Correct.
All right. Yeah, well.
But that would mean that if you did find something that was above that level, then you would stop work or whatever it kind of indicated until those levels went back down.
With our very stringent thresholds that we've established for the site, it is an immediate stop of work, evaluation, quick response, and then it's also notification to the DEC and the DOH. That is part of the community air monitoring plan.
Great, thank you for that explanation. Zachary Einstadt, I'm gonna go to you now if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate all the time and attention everyone has given to this problem. I guess I have two questions. The first is for Jane. What's kind of the issue limiting the ability to have a daily update, a site that is frequently updated with the results of these monitors? If we're collecting data every day, it seems lightweight to have a site that contains that data. Is it a money issue? Is it a resource issue? If it is one of those, is it possible, Zach, for Madison to step up? And I'm guessing it doesn't really change the ROI of the project to help create a site if the city is having a problem with that. So that local residents who care can frequently update and check every day to make sure that, if someone has a lower threshold for particulates taking effect on them, I don't know, everyone can decide their own threshold for what they want to do. The second is, and I apologize if this goes in the face of people worried about parking even further, but my issue with the construction workers and all that is predominantly the idea that there's so many pedestrians now down here. And as people are double parked, you have big trucks double parked in the middle of lanes. People are trying to walk across streets. I'm watching cars speed down the street as people with baby carriages, dogs, young kids are, dodging people left and right. I've been currently surveying the community, and I just think some type of crosswalk, some areas where there isn't parking so that people can safely cross the street and where double parking is especially not allowed, seems, the bare minimum of prudence. And again, I apologize to those who have issues with parking. I know this only makes things worse, but I think most people walk, and giving us a safe way to get from point A to point B seems really prudent as more trucks are coming into the area. Maybe that latter question is for Rensselaer and his team.
Well, I can kind of respond to your first question. So DEC, state DEC does not have the ability to post. We don't have the type of website that allows us to post daily content. Unfortunately, our ITS department for all state agencies is centralized in Albany, and getting them to do anything takes about 6 or 8 weeks. With that said, we do get daily reports. It is something that we have already started talking with Zach and with Ashley about. Those daily reports are available to the public, but the time frame that Brian would be able to turn them around and get them out to everybody is just, it's not, we can't turn on a dime like that. So that's why, there's been a few sites over the years that we've asked the responsible party, the remedial party, to set up a website. It's really up to them. I can't force them. It's not a requirement of the program, but I'll leave it to them to respond to that.
I think, Jane, we're still talking through the mechanism by which we would do that and how it would work. So, we haven't closed the door on it, and I think we're trying to find a workable solution. So I hope in the coming weeks there'll be an update for all that addresses this concern.
Thank you.
The second part of the question was about safety on the street.
What about it?
I realize that might not be more for you, Zach, and might have been more for Lincoln and his team, but more the idea of getting crosswalks, finding some way to keep protected places where pedestrians cross the street. It's a byproduct of construction, and I wouldn't blame Madison for it per se, other than it's just the way these things happen. But having crosswalks put in, having some type of place where pedestrians can worry less about double parked cars.
I hear you. Listen, as it relates to our site, obviously there's a construction fence, there's Yodocs, those big orange things, and that basically creates a pedestrian walkway around the perimeter of our site. Without, we don't have much control outside that.
No. This is not on Madison. This is very much on Kings County. This is on, the safety of the public side of things.
Zach, I think that's a great question. Definitely North Brooklyn Neighbors will work with the council member's office and with whomever else is interested, because it's a really great point. And it's always a challenge to have our infrastructure and all this safety and everything that we need to move at a pace that is at speed with development, or if we need it really, we should be planning instead of reacting, right? So I hear your point 100%. It's a good one. Thank you.
All right, Kay Summers is up next. And then after that, Laura Hoffman. And then if anyone else is interested in speaking, it's the line that would be open after that.
Thank you. I posted quite a few questions, so I'm gonna just read them off if you don't mind. Whoever decides to answer, that's fine with me. So the first question that I posted was, how much of the cleanup costs? Is the cost the reason why we keep getting broken promises from interested developers?
I'll tell you that the record of decision had a cost of approximately $20 million for the remedy that's been proposed. As the remedial design goes forward, that may reduce, it may go up. It all depends on how the remedial design moves forward. In terms of why, other developers walked away from it, I can't speak to that.
Okay, thank you. With so many high rises going up in a 5-block radius, is there some type of assurance that basic public services are being included into the building proposals? For example, public schools, K through 12, hospitals, libraries. The nearest hospital seems to be Woodhull Hospital if you're staying in Brooklyn and you're going across the bridge to go to Long Island City to another bridge that I'm not so familiar with.
I think that would be up to the electeds. That's not something that DEC has anything.
That is though another really great question, and one that certainly should be answered by our, elected leaders. And again, goes back to how are our communities planning for developments and responding to rezonings in these kind of comprehensive ways. So great point. I'm sorry, I don't think we're going to get an answer tonight.
Well, I can answer just briefly, sorry. Is that,
Great.
exactly right, that when these developments are done through a rezoning, that's when council members have leverage, right, to negotiate some of those community benefits, like that school that Lincoln mentioned earlier. In this instance, it's an as of right development. And so with this specific development, that negotiation can't really happen. And, Andrew probably knows this better than I do, but a number of community benefits were negotiated along with the Greenpoint rezoning. But part of the issue we're seeing, and we could have a whole other meeting on this, is actually holding developers who's not Madison Realty, other people, accountable for those promises that they made.
Thank you. And okay, so this goes to Madison. How much square footage will be built during this? So after the cleanup, what's the square footage that you guys are looking at?
Still in the planning stage with the architect, and there's still some moving pieces, but roughly on a gross square footage, let's say about 400,000 square feet.
And that consists of how many floor levels?
So the building steps down, because it's actually in 2 different zoning districts, but the tallest portion of the building will be 8 stories, then it steps to 7 and then 5.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And I just wanted to mention what would be great to bring up in bankruptcy court when you guys go, or if you guys go, is to mention how and what you guys are doing for the community. We're not whining, we're not complaining, we're just concerned, we're worried, we're scared for our families, for our future, for our health. So I don't want you to think that, because a little bit I saw, it seems as if you were like, oh my God, another question. I just want you to think you and your family being raised in this area and thinking some big construction is going on with all of this material that you have no clue about. I just want you to think, what would you think about that property? That's all we're saying. And it's only, go ahead.
I completely understand. Sorry if it came off that way. Honestly, our building heat is on and it was hot out today. And I think my office is 100 degrees. So that was the only reason why. But listen, we understand the concerns. We understand it's scary. That's why we're trying to have these meetings, weekly updates, be transparent. There are a lot of unknowns, and it really is a collaborative effort from the development side, the agency side, the community side. That's just going to be a process over, the cycle of the redevelopment.
Exactly. And I think I just have 2 more questions here. So I know Zach mentioned, there was another Zach who mentioned about parking. So I personally don't feel that there's a concern with parking. I think there is a concern with the interruption of our parking availability. I think that's different. So if there's absolutely no parking, the availability was once there. So I think I think it's not the fault of Madison that we have this parking constraint. I think the fault of Madison comes where there's no foresight to think what would happen to these, to these individuals that were used to parking, that has to take their stroller out their car at, 8 o'clock at night and, go 3 to 4 blocks with the baby crying and she has to make dinner. She or he has to make dinner. I just think that, those things weren't thought of when it comes to, okay, let's do this project, or let's fix it. I just think a lot of the times, maybe not in this case, and maybe it is in this case, that the community wasn't is an oversight about what was needed for the community. And my last question was for Jane. You mentioned 2 main contaminants. What are the other contaminants that we should be concerned about that are not like the holy grail of the batch?
Oh, well, how much time do you have, Kay? Look, it's an industrial site in New York City. We've got historic fill, which is contaminated with various semi-volatile organic compounds and some metals. There's some petroleum here and there on the site. But the things that are really, the two that I mentioned are what are driving the remediation, what are the basis for DEC to have made this a Superfund site. Those are the contaminants that we are most concerned about and that we really need to get remediated. As I mentioned, historic fill. Historic fill is found all over the city. In fact, you probably have it in the parks that your kids play in. It's everywhere. You've got surface contamination just from atmospheric fallout, just from trucks driving by, and it comes out and then it settles on the ground, and then you've got contamination on the ground. So, look, there's a lot of different. There's probably, I could name 100 different chemicals that we found on the site. Whether they are either health or environmental concerns or driving the remedy, the answer is no. The ones that are driving the remedy and that we're most concerned about are the phthalates and the TCE.
Okay, so I guess a secondary question to that is, so if someone is exposed to, let's say, the phthalates or the TCE, just like you said, if you're exposed, then that's the concern, right? So I have a medically fragile older son that lives with me here, which is a block away from the site. So I'm just thinking, so will someone, if I brought it to someone's attention to say, this is my concern, will someone actually tell me, you know what, Kay, you and your son need to move away for 1.5 years because he can possibly, something bad can possibly happen to him. And this company or the state will help you to move away and then come back because this is your neighborhood. Like, are we looking at those real life honesties here? Or do I have to, am I living in fear for my son for the next 2 years and just figuring it out? And, maybe next year hoping that he won't have any respiratory concerns or issues. Like, is it a hope, or should I just have faith? Maybe that I just answered my own question. I can't have faith in people that have some. I get it.
Let me try and tackle that. That's a huge question, right? My colleague from the Department of Health, Stephen Lawrence, is on the call, and Stephen has fielded quite a few questions, very personal, exposure and family, medical questions from people who live in the vicinity of the site. And really, DEC, we're the environmental, police, if you will. Questions about specific exposures, your specific health concerns, you could start with DOH, but they're probably going to tell you if you have a specific health concern, you need to talk to your, to your family physician. But look, the health department you could start with them. Stephen's information is available. I think, Lisa, if you can post DOH's contact information as well. I think you have that from the fact sheet. Stephen can answer a lot of these questions, not all of them. Look, I can't guarantee you anything, but we're putting everything that we know and that we've learned from cleaning up these types of sites over the last 30, 40 years. We're putting to work on this site.
I greatly appreciate that answer. But one thing I do have a question to go further with. Yes, I have consulted with my my PCP for my son. He can tell me that this area is not good for my son. Then, it's like he's already, so at that point, we know the area is not good for my son. So we literally, because of that, we have to, him or our entire family has to move. Who, if we don't have the money for that, then what? Then we're being kicked out of our own neighborhood. Like, are we, for those of us who love the neighborhood, who wants to stay and don't want to go, or don't want to go and never have to come back, that's where we are. No one's putting us in a place to say, hey, stay here for a year or two and then you can come back to your place to live, or even that your home will still be available. That's all I'm saying. I know you don't have the answer. I'm not looking for you to have the answer. I just am trying to provoke the thought about if people have to move, if they have to move because their child is too young and the child may have a respiratory disorder, or if there's older people in the family, or whoever has something, like, how can you feel, you have to make a life decision to move your family. And you have no guarantee to come back.
Kay, I hear.
Hi, Kate. Hi,
Sorry.
Kate. This is Angie. I just sent you a note with my and Steve's contact information.
Yes,
if you
yes,
have,
thank you.
Yep. If you have some time, please reach out to both of us or either one of us, and let's set up a time to talk, because there might be some things that we can do as part of the air monitoring that we don't typically do, but that we can do maybe in your case. So we'd like to talk to you about that.
I greatly appreciate that. Thank you so much. And
Sure.
I thank you everyone for listening to me. I just want you to just know that all of us here are not complaining. We're not whiners. We're just concerned and we're scared. That's it.
That was really well said, Kay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we are nearing the end. I do want to give 2 more people a chance to speak. So if you could kind of be quick about it, then maybe we could wrap up after that. So Laura Hoffman, I told you would be able to. And after that, Heather Milburn, please try to keep these quick, short, so we can kind of get out at the right time. And then we'll go from there. So Laura.
So before, I actually had a couple of things to say after Lisa spoke and the person from Department of Health, and I'm glad I went after Kay just now. But just so people in the chat understand where the concern about the phthalates come in, just one of my family stories of my oldest son, they lost 3 babies, 2 from 2 separate sets of twins, to Edwards syndrome. That's trisomy 18. As Lisa said before, the phthalates is an endocrine disruptor, and thus it's immunogenic, meaning that it changes cells and it causes birth defects, which is what that was. Doctors said that it was rarer than getting hit by lightning twice, because people do get hit by lightning twice, but they don't have 2 separate sets of twins and yet get a 3rd baby die of Edwards syndrome. So this is what exposure to phthalates and other contaminants look like here in the neighborhood. And that's just one story. I'll just glaze over all the brain cancers and brain diseases and autoimmune diseases that are happening right now in my family. So anything that can be done, should be done. And I'm glad that a commitment was made for Kay to maybe do some extra air monitoring, but that should be across the board. This is a very bad site, and everybody should be going above and beyond knowing what's happened in this neighborhood. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Laura. It's heartbreaking to hear about what your family has been through. Heather, you're the last person to ask a question.
Thank you, Lael. I think there's someone named Andrew who's also waiting too when Heather is done. Sorry.
And I will make it short, because many have echoed the questions and concerns throughout this call, and I've been to the same meetings Mike and Laura have been to for many years about this site. I hope that the developers, Zach, I hope you just hear from us that this site is complicated. It's about NuHart, certainly. It's also about development that has happened in, I would say, not a thoughtful way, because with the 2005 rezoning, this community was promised a lot of things. And still, we're at almost 20 years here where we've been promised things that haven't come through. We're hoping that the environmental discretion and care in remediation of this site, we need more voices to be heard. We need you to keep us in the loop. For example, I mentioned in the chat, I had like hours and hours of just drilling, just, to get to the disconnects, and then drilling just to get, poles to put the fencing on. So those kind of things like that are disruptive to the community. We need to know about those kind of things. And it's not about, like I said, it is about the school as well, concerns with the school. But that was Greenpoint Landing in 2005 for their 5 40-story or so buildings. There's 2 more going up. And still, so there's a lot of community issues with this particular small area. And so NuHart is definitely a part of that. And I'll leave that there.
Well, understood, Heather. But I mean, also for the updates, I just want to make sure you get the weekly updates, because we do post upcoming.
I read your weekly
activity.
updates. Yes. Thank you, Zach.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. I do get them.
No, just want to make sure, because the fence is important, and disconnects, which obviously, if you want, we can maybe be more specific if you think that would help.
Yeah.
But
that would be great. So if if we're hearing like jack out hammering for hours on end, especially with the work from home situation with people with COVID right now, noise is, that would be great for greater detail. It'd be appreciated.
2 things, and I can help you, I guess, Andrew. Schedule. The remediation is a sort of, we don't know right now, it's still too early, but a typical project of this, if we didn't have this type of remediation, let's say, is about 2 years. And then I would tack on some, again, hard to quantify right now if that's an additional 6 months, to what this looks like sort of from now through TCO. Part 2 is, I think, part of the willingness and sort of the collaboration of the agencies and electeds to try and figure this out with the site to get it cleaned up, is for us, in order to really make the deal work and clean up for the neighborhood, it is important for us to make sure those elements get in the ground before the June 15th deadline.
Thank you. Even though it is 8 o'clock, I definitely want, anybody that has their hand raised to be able to ask their question. And just so everybody knows, we're keeping the chat, and if things are, haven't been addressed tonight, we're not disappearing. We're continuing to work on all of this. And we're trying to bring in other help as needed. So I really appreciate everybody's questions, and I share a great many of your concerns. So yeah, if whoever was just going to ask that last question, if they wanted to go right ahead.
I believe that was Andrew asking about the timeline.
Oh, great.
So I think it was Andrew.
I'm sorry, Lisa, if I could just say this one last thing. I don't think we're all looking for all the positives. We know that there are a lot of negatives in this cleanup and in this build. We're all grown up here. We can take the truth. And I think the best truth we can exactly absorb is the one that we're looking for you and the company to give us so that we can at least swallow it. You know, we don't want to have to swallow a lie so that 3 years later we can look at our child and say, you know what, this is bullcrap. You know, they lied to us. At least if we're told the truth, we can make educated decisions. If you're filled with lies, you're unable to make the best decision for you and your family.
I could not agree more. Absolutely. So, you know, for that, I am going to share my screen again quickly to, oh my God, too many tabs as usual, to share everybody's contact information so that everybody has it. And there's a lot, right? So take a screenshot, but this will also be shared with you all at the end or after this meeting. We'll try and get it out as soon as possible. But you've got your assembly members' contact information, the council member, Madison Realty Capital folks, OER, DEC, and North Brooklyn Neighbors. I'm sorry, I didn't speak with anyone from Department of Health and the planning of this meeting, so I don't have their contact information here. But if folks from the DOH want to share their contact in the chat, that would be welcome. And then the larger link on the right, that is for the weekly updates. So if anybody else also wants that. So a lot of information and was shared tonight. Great discussion, hard discussion. And we are going to have to make some kind of difficult decisions as a community, especially when we get closer to the remedial design process. We're definitely going to need lots of community input on that. And I don't have a timeline for that at the moment. But for now, we're looking forward to is maybe not the right phrase, but the demolition of the building. And hopefully that is going to be seamless and quick and not so noisy. But really, we do want to see a full remediation of this whole site. And so the building's got to come down for us to get there. So thank you, Zach, and your team for being willing to communicate with us through all of this. You know, we're happy to have at least a developer that is present and open to our concerns. So thank you for that. I don't know, Lael, do you want to say anything else as we?
Just that, yeah, we'll do our best to all this information, all these emails that are coming in the chat and what we have up, we'll send out afterward to everyone who registered for this meeting, and we'll also have all that information up at our website. So want to make sure that this recording also is publicly available, so you can share it with neighbors or re-listen to things that you wanted to kind of hear a second time. So we'll do our best to get that out to you as soon as possible.
Thank you, Lael. And thank you again to all of our electeds for also being present and working with us, and to you, our fantastic neighbors. We love you so much and just hope that this continues to move forward with all of your input. And without anything else really to say, enjoy the last few days, weeks of winter, and we'll talk to you all very soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good
Take
night.
care.
Thank you. Good night.
Night. Thanks.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, Kay.